and great almighty ant slayer, Ed Sutton.
Hi everybody, I'm Ed Sutton and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey.
I got two apologies to make. I don't have any wild stories to tell like I did last week. And the second one is I feel like I got you here tonight under false pretenses. I said last week that we were going to talk about sex this week, and I decided not to. I'm going to save that until next week. I don't know, I feel kind of like a failure.
Sure this just isn't some more bait for this back here?
Well, maybe. This group needs contributions, Tom. The last time I did these step studies, I was able to cover steps 4 to my satisfaction in 2 weeks. It looks like it's going to take me 3 weeks this time. I don't know whether I know more that's not important and I want to talk about it, or whether I finally gotten to the bottom of something. I don't know which one. But tonight what I would like to do is I'd like to read step 4 in the 12 and 12. We didn't talk about any of that last week. It stayed in the big book on the resentments list and the fear list. But there's a lot of good information in the fourth step, and I think it's important that we talk about it. Creation gave us instincts for a purpose on page 42. Without them, we wouldn't be complete human beings. If men and women didn't exert themselves to be secure in their persons, made no effort to harvest food or construct shelter, there would be who denies himself both family and friends. Nor is the quest for security always expressed in terms of money. How frequently we see a frightened human being determined to depend completely upon a stronger person for guidance and protection. This weak one, failing to meet life's responsibilities with his own resources, never grows up. Disillusionment and helplessness are his lot. In time, all his protectors either flee or die, and he is once more left alone and afraid. We have also seen men and women who go power mad, who devote themselves to attempting to rule their fellows. These people often throw to the winds every chance for legitimate security and a happy family life. Whenever a human being becomes a battleground for the instincts, there can be no peace. And Bill in step 4 returns over and over to this theme of wrong dependence on other people, over-depending, and the desire to dominate, both being traps into which we fall. But that is not all the danger. Every time a person imposes his instincts unreasonably upon others, unhappiness follows. The power driver who will have his instincts or his desires or his wants or his supposed needs satisfied regardless of what the expense may be to another party. Always, always. I will always make someone else unhappy, and because they are unhappy, I will be unhappy. Because I think they have no reason to be unhappy, because all I wanted was what I wanted. If the pursuit of wealth tramples upon people who happen to be in the way, then anger, jealousy, and revenge are likely to be aroused. If sex runs riot, there is a similar uproar. Demands made upon other people for too much attention, protection, and love can only invite domination or revulsion in the protectors themselves, two emotions quite as unhealthy as the demands which evoke them. When an individual's desire for prestige becomes uncontrollable, whether in the sewing circle or at the international conference table, other people suffer and often revolt. This collision of instincts can produce anything from a cold snub to a blazing revolution. In these ways, we are set in conflict not only with ourselves, but with other people who have instincts too. And that's something I never realized, I guess. I never realized probably that I had instincts that were working in ways that I couldn't detect or that I didn't want to see But I never recognized that other people had needs that they needed to meet too. Only mine were important. And to hell with them. If I'm happy, what's wrong with them? Why are they angry? Alcoholics especially should be able to see that instincts run wild in themselves is the underlying cause for their destructive drinking. So Bill's putting the finger here on these misdirected instincts, this self-will run riot, as one of the primary causes for destructive drinking. We have drunk to drown feelings of fear, frustration, and depression. We have drunk to escape the guilt of passions, and then have drunk again to make more passions possible. Seems to be a self-defeating cycle, doesn't it? We have drunk for vainglory, that we might the more enjoy foolish dreams of pomp and power. This perverse soul sickness is not pleasant to look upon. And it's so recognizable in other people. Even when I was drinking and I was drunk, I could see it in other people. I would say, look at him. And I could never see it in my own behavior. It is not pleasant to look upon. Instincts on rampage balk at investigation. The minute we make a serious attempt to probe them, we are liable to suffer severe reactions. And probably if another person asked you to look at them, the action would be even more severe. If temperamentally we are on the depressive side, we are apt to be swamped with guilt and self-loathing. We wallow in this messy bog, often getting a misshapen and painful pleasure out of it. As we morbidly pursue this melancholy activity, we may sink to such a point of despair that nothing but oblivion looks possible as a solution. Here, of course, we have lost all perspective and therefore all genuine humility, for this is pride in reverse. This is not a moral inventory at all. It is the very process by which the depressive has so often been led to the bottle and extinction. And I think that sentence is important. That this is not a moral inventory at all when we experience this type of feeling, when we are trying to get these things down on paper that the directions tell us to put down on paper, that our motive that we have not done a sufficient amount of work in step 1, 2, and 3 in order to allow us to proceed in step 4 without getting swamped with guilt and self-loathing and wallowing in the messy bog. If, however, our natural disposition is inclined to self-righteousness or grandiosity, that's where I was when I wasn't in the messy bog. Our reaction will be just the opposite. We will be offended at AA's suggested inventory. No doubt we shall point with pride to the good lives we thought we led before the bottle cut us down. We shall claim that our serious character defects, if we think we have any at all, have been caused chiefly by excessive drinking. This being so, we think it logically follows that sobriety, first, last, and all the time, is the only thing we need to work for. We believe that our one-time good characters will be revived the moment we quit drinking. If we were pretty nice people all along except for our drinking, what need is there for a moral inventory now that we are sober? Other than we've got to get down to causes and conditions. It doesn't make any difference whether you think you were a saint when you were drunk or whether you are extremely ashamed of your behavior. The problem is the drinking is only a symptom, and we have to get down to causes and conditions, and the causes and conditions are revealed in the 4th step in the 3 lists that we make. We also clutch in another wonderful excuse for avoiding an inventory. Our present anxieties and troubles, we cry, are caused by the behavior of other people who really need a moral inventory. And I thought for sure that if my wife would only do this, that things would be a lot better. And if she hadn't been the person that she was, I wouldn't have beaten the shit out of the Christmas tree with a fireplace billows when I was sober 2 years. That was a wonderful Christmas, too. I should prepare a talk about how that Christmas went one of these days. We firmly believe that if only they'd treat us better, we'd be all right. Therefore, we think our indignation is justified and reasonable, that our resentments are the right kind. We aren't the guilty ones. They are. So here I go again, justifying and rationalizing my misdirected instincts and blaming other people. And we talked about the destructive cycle last night, or last week, about how the blame of others is the most time-consuming and the most destructive part of getting back to feelings of well-being. When I can finally get up and say, hey, I'm the problem, take a look at what I did, what the solution is for now and in the future, I can get back to those feelings of well-being. I've got to learn how to cut out the blame of others in my thinking. At this stage of the inventory proceedings, our sponsors come to the rescue. They can do this, for they are the carriers of AA's tested experience with Step 4. They comfort the melancholy one by first showing him that his case is not strange or different, that his character defects are probably not more numerous or worse than those of anyone else in AA. This the sponsor promptly proves by talking freely and easily and without exhibitionism about his own defects, past and present. This calm yet realistic stock-taking is immensely reassuring. The sponsor probably points out that the newcomer has some assets which can be noted along with his liabilities. This tends to clear away morbidity and encourage patience. As soon as he begins to be more objective, the newcomer can fearlessly, rather than fearfully, look at his own defects. And if you'll remember last week, Tony asked a question about if we should put the good things down on this inventory, and the instructions say no. That if the good things about you got you drunk, then put them down. If they didn't, there's no need to list them. And what Bill's talking about here is someone who is in the depths of depression, and a sponsor will encourage him, to think a little better of himself by talking a little bit about, well, there are some things right with you, and there's things right with all of us, regardless of what our condition emotionally may be at any time. There's always some good things, and I've got to remember that, at all times, even though I don't feel good about myself because of something that I've done. There's always a lot of right about me and a lot of good. The sponsor of those who feel they need no inventory are confronted with quite another problem. Did I skip a paragraph? No, I didn't. This is because people who are driven by pride of self-consciously blind themselves to their liabilities. These newcomers scarcely need comforting. The problem is to help them discover a chink in the walls their ego has built, through which the light of reason can shine. And this is the grandiose one. The first one was the depressive one, wallowing in the messy bog. This is the knight in shining armor who, hey, I drank a little bit, but there's nothing wrong with me, And so, as a sponsor, I've had to help people dig through the wall of China to see what was on the other side. The wall of China that they had put up between their pride and ego and what was really wrong with them. First off, they can be told that the majority of AA members have suffered severely from self-justification during their drinking days. For most of us, self-justification was the maker of excuses. Excuses, of course, for drinking and for all kinds of crazy and damaging conduct. We had made the invention of alibis a fine art. We had to drink because times were hard or times were good. We had to drink because at home we were smothered with love or got none at all. We had to drink because at work we were great successes or dismal failures. We had to drink because our nation had won a war or lost a peace, and so it went on ad infinitum. So whatever worked for me, I was either a success and I drank, or I was a failure and I drank. It didn't make any difference. It just, whatever side of the fence I was on that day, that was the reason I drank. We thought conditions, and that's in quotes, drove us to drink. And when we tried to correct these conditions and found that we couldn't to our entire satisfaction, our drinking went out of hand and we became alcoholics. It never occurred to us that we needed to change ourselves to meet conditions, whatever they were. And that had never occurred to me. I just thought I was blowing from pillar to post on a wind-tossed sea, and that I had absolutely no control over what was going on in my life, that I had to react continually to whatever I was confronted with, and my reaction was always one of defensiveness or anger because I didn't like what was going on. I never understood until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous that my life is a matter of my attitude about my circumstances and conditions that I find myself in right now. And that there's a lot of things I can do about my circumstances and conditions, and there's a lot of things I can't do about my circumstances and conditions, but I can always do something about my attitude about it. I may not like it. I may not understand it. I may not know all that I'd like to know about it, but my attitude can still be one of health and not one of unhealth. But in AA, we slowly learned that something had to be done about our vengeful resentments, self-pity, and unwarranted pride. We had to see that every time we played the big shot, we turned people against us. We had to see that when we harbored grudges and planned revenge for such defeats, we were really beating ourselves with the club of anger we had intended to use on others. So anger, when I become angry, I am the one that suffers. The object of my anger is really relatively unharmed. I'm the vessel that contains the anger, not the other person. Now, I can provoke anger in the other person, but that's his business. What I do to myself is my business. We learned that if we were seriously disturbed, our first need was to quiet that disturbance, regardless of who or what we thought caused it. To see how erratic emotions victimized us often took a long, 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 long time. That's why they say keep coming back. It took me absolutely years to even begin to see how my erratic emotions were victimizing me. Even to detect what the erratic emotions were that I was experiencing. Because my pride was telling me that I'm okay as long as I pretend that I am. It doesn't make any difference what I feel inside if I pretend that I'm okay. Nobody will bother me and make me do these things that I don't want to do. We could perceive them quickly in others, the erratic emotions, but only slowly in ourselves. First of all, we had to admit that we had many of these defects, even though such disclosures were painful and humiliating. Where other people were concerned, we had to drop the word blame from our speech and thought. This required great willingness even to begin. But once over the first 2 or 3 high hurdles, of course, the course ahead began to look easier. For we had started to get perspective on ourselves, which is another way of saying that we were gaining humility. And Bill's starting to talk about this word humility a little bit. And he defines it on page 58 in this book. Let's go over there and read that so we all are talking about the same thing here. Down in the second, well, the first complete paragraph there, says another great dividend we may expect from confiding our defects to another human being is humility, a word often misunderstood. And here's the definition that Bill would like for us to come to use in our daily thinking. To those who have made progress in AA, it amounts to a clear recognition of what and who we really are, followed by a sincere attempt to become what we could be. And, you know, that's very simple and very direct and very workable. You know, and I, on a daily basis, I try to remember who and what I am. You know, the first thing I am is a human being. And I have all of the struggles and troubles that every human being has, and no more. I only get my fair share to do with as I please. The second thing I am is an alcoholic. And because I'm an alcoholic, if I want to live a sober and happy and contented, useful life, and I am required to do things that a normal person is not required to do or may do by natural instinct. But I'm not able to do these things naturally. I must do them consciously, and I must do them with other people's help. The third thing I have to remember is that I have, because I am, number one, a human being, that property comes with severe flaws as it is. And number two, because I am an alcoholic, the third thing I have to remember is that I am an emotional cripple. That is who and what I am. Followed by a sincere attempt to become what I can be. And what I can be is what I can visualize in my mind. And what has become what I can visualize in my mind is this thing that is contained in the promises. That's the life I want to live. So I have to sincerely attempt to put into action these things so that that mental image that I have of myself can be reproduced in reality to the best of my ability, one day at a time. Okay, let's go back over to page 48. Anybody help me out with where I am?
Of course.
Of course, the depressive and the power driver are personality extremes, types with which AA and the whole world abound. Often these personalities are just as sharply defined as the examples given. But just as often, some of us will fit more or less into both classifications. Human beings are never quite alike, so each of us, when making an inventory, will need to determine what his individual character defects are. Having found the shoes that fit, he ought to step into them and walk with new confidence that he is at last on the right track. Now let us ponder the need for a list of the more glaring personality defects all of us have in varying degrees. And when he says all of us, he's talking about the entire human race. All humans have these personality defects in varying degrees. Ours seem to be magnified. To those having religious training, such a list would set forth serious violations of moral principles. Some others will think of this list as defects of character. Still others will call it an index of maladjustments. Some will become quite annoyed if there is talk about immorality, let alone sin. But all who are in the least reasonable will agree upon one point, that there is plenty wrong with us alcoholics, about which plenty will have to be done if we are to expect sobriety, progress, and any real ability to cope with life. To avoid falling into confusion over the names these defects should be called, let's take a universally recognized list of major human failings. The 7 deadly sins of pride, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth. And I don't recommend that people commit anything to memory in Alcoholics Anonymous. It doesn't seem to, if you need to remember something, you will, but you might want to memorize these or write them down on a piece of paper and carry them in your purse or your billfold, because this is a good way to check my actions by remembering what the 7 deadly sins are. Pride. If I think it, say it, or do it, it's right, and get out of the way, because I'm either going over you or through you. Greed. Wanting more than what I need or deserve. Lust. Sexual fantasies run rampant. I knew you came to hear about sex tonight. Anger. I'm mad because I didn't get my way. Gluttony. Eating and drinking more than is necessary. Envy. You got what I want, and I'm mad at you because you have it. Sloth. Sitting on my ass and wondering what's wrong.
Good one. Good definition. Perfect.
It is not by accident that pride heads the procession. Let's read that again. It is not by accident that pride heads the procession, for pride, leading to self-justification and always spurred by conscious or unconscious fears, is the basic breeder of most human difficulties, the chief block to true progress. Pride lures us into making demands upon ourselves or upon others which cannot be met without perverting or misusing our God-given instincts. When the satisfaction of our instincts for sex, security, and society becomes the sole object of our lives, then pride steps in to justify our excesses. And you remember that we talked about self-delusion and self-deception, that without self-delusion, there is no disease of alcoholism. That is the bedrock of the disease. It is the bedrock of the mental side of the disease. And pride is what drives self-delusion. All these failings generate fear, a soul sickness in its own right. Then fear, in turn, generates more character defects. Unreasonable fear that our instincts will not be satisfied drives us to covet the possessions of others, to lust for sex and power, to become angry when our instinctive demands are threatened, to be envious when the ambitions of others seem to be realized while ours are not, We eat, drink, and grab for more of everything than we need, fearing we shall never have enough. And with genuine alarm at the prospect of work, we stay lazy. I want all this. I want every bit of it. But I don't want to do anything. I don't know how many times I became a millionaire sitting on my couch and and just writing down numbers and making plans, and I never got up and made a telephone call. We loaf and procrastinate, or at best work grudgingly and under half steam. These fears are the termites that ceaselessly devour the foundation of whatever sort of life we try to build. You know, an inability or an unwillingness to take action in and of itself is a cause of fear. And I am unwilling, and I have an inability to take action in many, many cases. And when I recognize the symptoms, I now have the good sense in most cases not to let it persist for longer than I get enjoyment out of it, and I take action and I get rid of the fears. But if I am unwilling to take action, if I am unwilling to get up off my couch so I can go earn this money that I have just proved to myself on paper that I can earn, then I'm going to be fearful that I might starve to death, be evicted, etc., etc., etc. You know, if I get a speeding ticket and I am unwilling to go to court, that is going to be a cause of fear, because I know that they are going to come get me one way or the other. The computer's arm, it reaches around the entire planet. I could immigrate to Singapore, get stopped with taillights out, and my name would come up on a computer on a bench warrant because I didn't appear in Bonita Park traffic court. So, because I was unwilling to go to court, I have fear in my life. I was unwilling to take the action that life was requiring me to take. If I am unable to take action, I have the same feelings. If I get a ticket today and my court date is 30 days from now, well, a traffic ticket's a rather minor matter, but let's say I have something serious coming up in my life in 30 days. And I am trying to plan what's going to happen or figure out what's going to happen for the next 30 days. I am going to experience a lot of fear. He's going to say that, she's going to do this, the lawyer is, the judge is, and if that happens, then what's going to happen to me? Well, this is worst case, but I've got all this stuff going on in my mind. And if I'm willing to take action and I go confront whatever this may be, all my fears will go away on the day that I am supposed to take the action, because then all the unknown is gone. I know what has been said. I don't have to guess what's going to be said. I know what the results were. I know what the consequences are. So it's all over. It's a big sense of relief, and it wasn't as bad as I had projected anyway. Here's why it's so important to live your life one day at a time. Because I am unable to take action on anything that is going to occur in the future. I have to stay in today to keep the fears of inaction out of my life. I have to stay willing to take action on what things come into my life on a daily basis. Immediately. If I can remember these two things, live my life one day at a time. Let the troubles for today be the troubles for today. For tomorrow will worry about itself. There may be some things that I have to do to get prepared for this event, but I'm not thinking about who's going to say what and what may happen or what may not happen or what. I just prepare myself to take action at the appropriate time. If I can remember this thing, the inability and the unwillingness is what's causing me my fears and causing me to let these instincts go out of whack on me in some cases. And my life becomes a little easier. So when AA suggests a fearless moral inventory, it must seem to every newcomer that more is being asked of him than he can do. Both his pride and his fear beat him back every time he tries to look within himself. Pride says you need not pass this way. Fear says you dare not look. But the testimony of AAs who have really tried a moral inventory is that pride and fear of this sort turn out to be boogeymen, nothing else. Once we have a complete willingness to take inventory and exert ourselves to do the job thoroughly, a wonderful light falls upon this foggy scene. As we persist, a brand new kind of confidence is born, and the sense of relief at finally facing ourselves is indescribable. These are the first fruits of step 4. So I get a sense of relief at finally taking some action on this 4th step, if I've been putting it off. But the newcomer has probably arrived at the following conclusions: that his character defects representing instincts gone astray have been the primary cause of his drinking and failure at life, that unless he is now willing to work hard at the elimination of the worst of these defects, both sobriety and peace of mind will still elude him, that all the faulty foundations of his life will have to be torn out and built anew on bedrock. That all the faulty foundation of his life will have to be torn out and built anew on bedrock. And everything is built on the rubble of the past. And we rebuild our lives on this rubble that we're tearing out of this faulty foundation. We rebuild our lives on what's wrong with us, not what's right with us. Now willing to commence the search for his own defects, he will ask, just how do I go about this? How do I take inventory of myself? And here's a very important paragraph. If you ever get lost, bogged down, or you're sponsoring anybody who's lost and bogged down, here's very, very explicit instructions about how to get going on this thing. Since step 4 is but the beginning of a lifetime practice, it can be suggested that he first have a look at those personal flaws which are acutely troublesome and fairly obvious. I know what's bothering me if I just want to be honest. I don't have to worry about the minutia of what, my entire biography of my life. What I'm looking for are the patterns that have been developed in my life, the patterns of my behavior And yeah, those other things should be on a 4-step maybe. But I know what's eating me up inside. Acutely troublesome and fairly obvious. What's making me cringe when I can't shut it out of my mind and it slips in for just a microsecond. I know what they are. And I know what kind of behavior is causing me trouble. I've just got to get started at being honest and start nibbling on these big things and let the other stuff go for a while. But I got to get started somewhere, and it says that's the place to get started. Acutely troublesome and fairly obvious. Using his best judgment of what has been right and what has been wrong, he might make a rough survey of his conduct with respect to his primary instincts for sex, security, and society. Looking back over his life, he can readily get underway by consideration of questions such as these. When and how, in just what instances, did my selfish pursuit of a sex relation damage other people and me? What people were hurt and how badly? Did I spoil my marriage and injure my children? Did I jeopardize my standing in the community? Just how did I react to these situations at the time? Did I burn with the guilt that nothing could extinguish? Or did I insist that I was the pursued, not the pursuer, and thus absolve myself? How have I reacted to frustration in sexual matters? When denied, did I become vengeful or depressed? Did I take it out on other people? If there was rejection or coldness at home, did I use this as a reason for promiscuity? So Bill's given a brief outline of how to trigger some thoughts to ask yourself, about what the consequences and the results of your behavior, or of my behavior, have been. Also of importance for most alcoholics are the questions they must ask about their behavior respecting financial and emotional security. In these areas, fear, greed, possessiveness, and pride have too often done their worst. Surveying his business or employment record, almost any alcoholic can ask questions like these. In addition to my drinking problem, what character defects contributed to my financial instability? Did fear and inferiority about my fitness for my job destroy my confidence and fill me with conflict? Did I try to cover up those feelings of inadequacy by bluffing, cheating, lying, or evading responsibility? And I did all those things. Or by griping that others failed to recognize my truly exceptional abilities? Did I overvalue myself and play the big shot? Did I have such unprincipled ambition that I double-crossed and undercut my associates? Was I extravagant? Did I recklessly borrow money, caring little whether it was repaid or not? Was I pinch penny, refusing to support my family properly? Did I cut corners financially? What about the quick money deals, the stock market, and the races? Business women in AA will naturally find that many of these questions apply to them too. But the alcoholic housewife can also make the family financially insecure. She can juggle charge accounts, manipulate the food budget, spend her afternoons gambling, and run her husband into debt by irresponsibility, waste, and extravagance. But all alcoholics who have drunk themselves out of jobs, family, and friends will need to cross-examine themselves ruthlessly to determine how their own personality defects have thus demolished their security. The most common symptoms of emotional insecurity are worry, anger, self-pity, and depression. Now, that isn't a complete list, but Bill thought he didn't have enough room to list them all, but that's enough to work on in my lifetime. Worry, anger, self-pity, and depression. I think I told you last week I thought self-pity was going to kill me before I found out what it was. These stem from causes which sometimes seem to be within us and other times to come from without. To take inventory in this respect, we ought to consider carefully all personal relationships which bring continuous or recurring trouble. It should be remembered that this kind of insecurity may arise in any area where instincts are threatened. Questions directed to this end might run like this. Looking at both past and present, what sex situations have caused me anxiety, bitterness, frustration, or depression? Praising each situation fairly, can I see where I have been at fault? Did these perplexities beset me because of selfishness or unreasonable demands? Or if my disturbance was seemingly caused by the behavior of others, why do I lack the ability to accept conditions I cannot change? These are the sort of fundamental inquiries that can disclose the source of my discomfort and indicate whether I may be able to alter my own conduct and so adjust myself serenely to self-discipline. Suppose that financial insecurity constantly arouses these same feelings. I can ask myself, to what extent have my own mistakes fed my gnawing anxieties? And if the actions of others are part of the cause, what can I do about that? If I am unable to change the present state of affairs, am I willing to take the measures necessary to shape my life to conditions as they are? And there it is again. I'm responsible for my life. How am I going to live it? What changes can I make? What changes can I make? What changes am I going to have to make in my attitudes about my circumstances? Questions like these, more of which will come to mind easily in each individual case, will help turn up the root causes. So what Bill's trying to give us the idea is that when we do our fourth step, when we write down our fears and the resentments and the sex problems, we really need to ask ourselves some questions and dig down to see what was really at the bottom of it. Not only the causes, but the results, and see how we've damaged ourselves and how we've damaged others. And it's less and less a mechanical type thing when we do this, and the results are much more dramatic when we do this hard questioning of ourselves, when we're doing this fourth step and get a better understanding through this process of self-discovery. But it is from our twisted relations with family, friends, and society at large that many of us have suffered the most. And, there really isn't anything else except family, friends, and society at large. I had twisted relations everywhere I looked. I didn't get along with anybody or anything or any institution, or still don't get along with a few institutions, but I'm working on that one. And Bill uses a word here that I don't like, but I think he uses it for a reason. He says we have been especially stupid and stubborn about them. I don't like the word stupid, but I do like the definition. Ignorance means that I don't have the information on a given subject. Like I'm very ignorant of nuclear physics. I'm ignorant of changing spark plugs in cars. Stupid means I couldn't do anything with the information if I had it. And that's what he was telling us, that we're getting information in our lives all the time. This input from outside of ourselves. I don't like the way you're behaving. I don't like what you're doing to me. Get away from me, go away, don't ever come back, and I'm getting all this information, and he's saying that I'm stupid because I don't know what to do with it. My approach is to try harder to do these things that are causing me the trouble to begin with. The primary fact that we fail to recognize is our total inability to form a true partnership with another human being. And I have no idea how to do that. It's something that I have to consciously do today. I'm a lot better at forming a true partnership with another human being than I was a number of years ago. But it's something that I'm still working on. Our egomania digs two disastrous pitfalls. Either we insist upon dominating the people we know, or we depend upon them far too much. If we lean too heavily on people, they will sooner or later fail us, for they are human too and cannot possibly meet our incessant demands. In this way, our insecurity grows and festers. When we habitually try to manipulate others to our own willful desires, they revolt and resist us heavily. Then we develop hurt feelings, a sense of persecution, and a desire to retaliate. As we redouble our efforts at control and continue to fail, our suffering becomes constant and acute, or acute and constant. That means it hurts like hell and it doesn't quit. We have not once sought to be one in a family, to be a friend among friends, to be a worker among workers, to be a useful member of society. Always we tried to struggle to the top of the heap or to hide underneath it. This self-centered behavior blocked a partnership relation with any one of those about us. Of true brotherhood, we had small comprehension. Some will object to many of the questions posed because they think their own character defects have not been so glaring. To these, it can be suggested that a conscientious examination is likely to reveal the very defects the objectionable questions are concerned with. Because our surface record hasn't looked too bad, we have frequently been abashed to find that this is so simply because we have buried these self-same defects deep down in us under thick layers of self-justification, and there that self-deception, self-delusion, self-justification was the bedrock of the disease that prevents me from getting well unless I'm willing to do this fourth step. Whatever the defects, they have finally ambushed us into alcoholism and misery. Therefore, thoroughness ought to be the watchword when taking inventory. In this connection, it is wise to write out our questions and answers. It will be an aid to clear thinking and honest appraisal. It will be our first tangible efforts of our complete willingness to move forward. I'm going to stop there, and thanks for listening.